Hello and welcome to this tutorial to help you learn more about building Workbooks reports. In this session, we're starting to look at some commonly used formulae and situations where using them will help you to build better reports. Formulae can be used for many purposes, including carrying out calculations, such as additions, subtractions, multiplications, and so on. For example, if you've got a straightforward commission structure, you might multiply the value of the deal by a decimal number to return the amount of commission on each deal, and then add the values up in a summary report to show how much each salesperson has earned. The symbols used for these calculations are just like the ones used on your computer keyboard or in Excel, so hopefully you'll find them familiar. You can use a formula to compare data from a field with data of your choice and return one value if they match and another if they don't. For example, you might want to attribute sales reps to a particular sales territory. So you might say something like, if the sales rep is Bill, then the sales territory is Northern. You can use formulae to reformat data, such as formatting dates to display differently, maybe round decimal values up or down, or change the case of a string of text to upper or lower case, and so on. You can do lots of things with dates, such as calculating the difference in days between two dates, or adding a time period to a date. For example, you might want a report to show you all your contracts that are due to expire in more than 90 days but less than 180 days, so that you can run a renewal outreach program. You can use the concatenation function to join data together, such as displaying a number followed by a percentage symbol. And you can convert data from one type to another, for example converting a number into a string of data. To give you a little bit of background, formulae in Workbooks reports are written using a cut-down selection of MySQL statements. For some of you this might mean something, but for the majority of you it probably doesn't. Rest assured though, there are many similarities with formulae in Excel, and there are lots of resources on the internet to help you if you need them. I'll provide links to a couple of useful sites later. You may hear the formulae being described as clauses, as queries, maybe statements, or functions, and for our purposes this terminology isn't particularly important and it's interchangeable. What is important though, just like in Excel, is that you use the correct syntax when writing your formulae. The majority of our customers never need to build formulae and can use the inbuilt totals and counts and averages and so on that have been covered in other tutorials. But there are three areas that do come up quite frequently. As I said previously, we'll focus on the case function in this tutorial, and the case function is a type of conditional formula. There is a separate tutorial covering the if function, which is also an example of a conditional formula. There's a third tutorial covering concat. Concat is short for concatenation, or simply joining two or more things together in a string. We'll have a look at the theory behind each of these in the tutorials, and then build a Workbooks report to demonstrate them. If you've already watched the tutorial on the if statement, you'll find that the case statement is very similar to a nested if. Both are conditional formulae, and both use the principle of repeatedly testing conditions. If the first one's met, it stops looking. But if the first one isn't met, the formula moves on and tests the next condition. If that's met, it stops, otherwise it moves on to the next, and so on and so on. On the screen at the moment, if you're writing a case formula, first you need the word case, and then you need to instruct the formula what it is that you're testing for. Then you start a row with the word when, and instruct the formula what the first value you're looking for is. Then you use the word then, and instruct the formula what output you want to see. On the next row we've said, well, let's look for a different value, not the first value, a second value, and we've used the word when before that, and then we've got then, and the output that we want to see if the second value is returned from the thing that we're testing. And you go on this way. It doesn't just have to be 3 things you're testing, you could have 10, 12, 15, however many that you actually need to test for. But when you're done with testing things that you're explicitly looking for, you use the word else and instruct the formula what you want to see if none of the conditions you've already specified are met. So it's kind of a safety net, it catches the things that maybe you haven't thought of. And finally, to close off the formula, you use the word end. Imagine that you've been asked to build a report to show different teams depending on the industry sector the organisation is in, as shown on the table that's on the screen at the moment. In a case statement, assuming that you were starting your report based on organisation records, you'd enter the formula like this. First you'd type the word case, or you can select it from a formula list, and then enter the field name that you're looking to match, which for us is industry. Then you type the word when and enter the text value that you're looking for. So for us, because it is a text value, it's wrapped in apostrophes. Then there's the word then, followed by the text we want to see if there's a match, which for us is team 1, again wrapped in apostrophes. If you wanted to display the contents of another field instead of text, you'd enter the field name here by using the field picker, and you wouldn't need to use those apostrophes. Next, you repeat the syntax of the previous row, but changing the value that you're looking for and the output value, and so on until you've entered all the values that you're looking for. Then you use the else clause in case there's anything you haven't defined already in your formula, and finally you use the word end to close off the formula. So I'll go into Workbooks to build that out. Here in Workbooks, I've got a report open in edit mode. It's a very simple report, just a details tab based on organisations, and it has a few columns in it, just 4, including the industry column. Remember, what we're aiming to do is create a calculated column that will transform, if you like, the industry sector and attribute them into different teams. So I'm going to click on Add Calculated Column. Now you can just start typing the word case, just like you can with the if statement if you're familiar with that one. But to pick it, you can pick it from the Add a Function option below the formula window. It's a conditional function, and then when you use the next drop down, you can see here it is, case. Either way is absolutely fine. The next thing I'm going to do is tell the formula which field it is that I'm looking at, that I'm testing if you like. I know it's the industry field, so I'm selecting that. And in actual fact, I could have typed that in, but I really do recommend that when you're adding columns, even if you think you know the name of it, do select it from here, because what the formula is looking for is the underlying database name, not the label that you're used to seeing through the front end as a user. Now you don't have to put the rest of the formula onto a new row, but I find it much easier to read if I do. So when, and then the first one was manufacturing. Notice I'm putting manufacturing in apostrophes because it's a string of text, and then team 1. The when, the then, the case don't have to be in uppercase, but personally I find it makes the formula much easier to read if I do those pieces of the function in uppercase when I come back to look at it later. So I'm starting a new row, and my next option was education, and if it was education then it was team 2, and we were only given 3 teams to divide things into. We had an instruction to put everything else into team 4, so you need the word else and team 4, and finally the word end to finish off the formula. I've got my new column here, team 1, 3, 2 and so on, and as always I do recommend that you just do a sense check. So was manufacturing supposed to be in team 1? Yes it was. Was construction in team 3? Yes it was. IT and telecommunications, for example, wasn't explicitly listed in the values that we were searching for in the industry field, so that's been put into team 4. That's the else instruction in the formula. So that all looks fine. Remember, now that you've got this column that does something different with your data and attributes the data into different teams, if you wanted to, you can use that column in other views of this report. So imagine if I wanted to, for instance, split out the organisations, a count of the organisations in each team. So I could add a summary view, add a split column. I'm actually going to use the organisation reference here and count it, but split across my new column called team. And there we go. I can now see how many organisations on my database fall into each of those teams. That was a relatively simple case statement, just testing one value, the industry value, on an organisation record. Let's take it on a step further and test more than one thing with a case statement. In this example, it says that the support manager wants a way to attribute priorities to cases, not just based on the value in the priority field, but also on the status itself. In effect, has the case been started? So in the table it says that if the priority is very high and the status is new, give it an output, give it a descriptor of P1. If the priority is high and the status is new, then it's a P2. The third row says if it's very high, the priority is very high, and the status is not new, then give it a P3. And it goes on down the rows until at the bottom here it says anything else, everything else, give it an output of P6. This isn't us saying that this is the neatest or the best way to categorize your cases for action, but it's an example to show you how you can use two things that you're testing within a case statement. And you do have to write it slightly differently from the way we did the last one. You still start with the word case, but instead of putting next to it the thing that you're testing, you go straight into the next row. And hopefully you can work out from here, even though we're looking at the field names rather than the labels, this says when the priority is very high and the status is new, equal to new, then P1. Likewise, the next row, when priority is high and status name is new, then P2. Then we've got when priority is very high and status name is not equal to new, then P3. And I've introduced some syntax here that I don't think you've seen before on these tutorials. It's this not equal to. And in Workbooks or MySQL, you need to use the exclamation mark followed by the equal symbol to say not equal to. You may have seen in other tools an equal symbol with a slash through it, or maybe the less than and greater than symbols. But for Workbooks purposes, when you're trying to say not equal to in a formula, always use the exclamation mark followed by the equal symbol. Then we go on and build out the rest of the rows in a similar way to the way that we built the previous case statement. It's just that every row includes an and. We get to the row that says else, P6, we've seen else before, and finish off with the end instruction to close off the formula. So I'll go into Workbooks and build that one for you. In Workbooks here, I've got a report open in edit mode. It's a simple report, a detailed report based on cases, and there are already some columns in my report. Various ones, case number, summary, and so on. I've also got the columns for priority and status, which are the two things that I'm going to test in the calculator column that I'm about to build. You don't have to have these columns showing in your report to be able to build the calculated column, not at the details level. But for a sense check, once you have built your formula, I would recommend that you take a moment or two to compare the formula with the output that you're expecting, and it's easier to do that if you've got the relevant columns showing. So I'm going to add a calculated column, and I can just start typing the word case, or I could pick it from the add a function option. Then it's when, and the first field I'm interested in is the priority field on a case, so I'm going to use the column picker for that. So when priority name equals very high, that's the first part of my test, but remember there's a second part for us, so I need the word and the next thing I'm testing is the status field. So again, I'm going to pick that, and status equals new. Now that I've specified the two tests that I want to do, I then put in what it is I want to return, P1. If you're comfortable that everything you've put in there is right, then you can copy it and paste it and just change the moving pieces, if you like, for your subsequent rows. So when priority name equals high and status name equals new, then we want P2. For my third row, this was the one about if the priority name is very high and the status name is not equal to new. And remember, to do that you use the exclamation mark followed by the equal symbol. And in that scenario this would be P3. I'll copy that again, and this time when the priority is like too high and the status name is not equal to new, then we'll make that P4. And the final row was when priority name is 3 medium and the status name is equal, so I'll get rid of my exclamation mark, to new, then P5. We then had an else clause to say everything else would be a P6, and then we use end to close off the formula. When I go to save and close my column, you'll see that I've got a warning message telling me that there's another column with the same title, which is absolutely true. It's the priority field on the case itself. So give it another name. Maybe I will call it something completely different, deal with in this order. Doesn't matter, as long as it speaks to the people who are looking at the report and they understand what the column means. So of course that new column will be over on the far right. There it is. And just to help me test it, I'm going to drag and drop it between my status column and the existing priority column and just do a quick sense check about, does this seem right? If I maybe sort by priority, so we've got some very high priority here, but they've only been given P3, but they're being tested, they're not new. So that would seem right. Whereas this one, it's very high priority, it's new, therefore it's been given a P1. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but do some sensible sense checking to make sure that you're comfortable with the report itself. If you've already watched the video on conditional formatting, you might remember that we used a case statement there to apply colours to the organisation account health field, and we can do the same sort of thing with the priority field we've just created. Let's say that your support manager has now asked you to add colours to the cases as shown in the two right-hand columns of the table. For example, P1, he wants to have a background colour of deep pink with white writing, whereas a bit lower down, if something is P4, he wants the background colour to be a coral colour with white writing, and this final row, for example P6, a pale green background colour with black writing on it. Let's go into Workbooks to do that. We've already got our report on cases, and it includes the new priority column that we've called Deal Within This Order. The easiest way to add the conditional formatting is to create a summary view and add in the columns that you want to see. For speed, I'm just going to add in a couple of columns just to show you the theory of this. So I'll use that Deal Within This Order one, and I'll add in the case reference as well, the case number. So I've got my two columns but with no conditional formatting yet. For that I need to add a calculated column. And there is a tutorial about conditional formatting, so I'm not going to go over this in too much detail, but hopefully you'll follow with the theory. So in terms of the styling that we want to apply, we're looking at the new column that we created in the parent view, the one called Deal Within This Order. So I'm going to use the Add a Column option to select that. Now it says it's from the parent. And when the output is P1, then, and now I need to give the formula the instructions for what I want the background and the text colour to be, which was deep pink, the background, and the text colour was white. Now that I've got my styling column in place, if I refresh the preview, you can see it's here over on the right hand side, but it's just a lot of text. Doesn't really mean an awful lot until you apply it to one or both of these columns. So if I reopen my Deal Within This Order column and go to the Style tab, and I can change this so that it's using calculated conditional styling, and it will say, well, which column contains the instruction. It's the one called styling. Save and close. And now you can see straight away that all of these options are coloured. If you want just one column coloured like that, that's fine. If I wanted it to be across multiple columns in my report, I could go and open case number and do exactly the same thing. Open the Style tab, calculated conditional styling, and use my styling column again. It's getting to be quite a loud report, but that's okay. Typically as well, what you would do is hide the styling column from here, because that doesn't really make sense to the end user. And if I save and run that, there you go, another application of using the case statement. Let's have a quick recap on what we've covered in this tutorial. The case statement is known as a conditional function because it checks to see whether or not a condition is met and returns one value if the condition is met and another if it isn't. It's often used in place of a nested if function, and that's generally because most users find it much less complex to put together. You don't have to worry about commas and you don't have to worry about matching brackets and so on, but you do still have to get the syntax right. The values that can be returned using a case statement can be strings of text, in which case you would need to wrap the text in opening and closing apostrophes. The values can be numbers or calculations, or you can return the value from another field. I mentioned earlier that Workbooks reporting formulae use a cut-down version of MySQL, and there's lots of sites on the web that might be helpful with the syntax. Two that we find particularly useful are dev.mysql.com and another one called w3schools.com. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you found it useful. Please do visit our knowledge base for more help on reporting in particular, and you'll find that section on workbooks.com/help/reporting.